Now is Will Hild, Executive Director of Consumers Research. He also has the website clevelandclinicexposed.com. That is clevelandclinicexposed.com. Will, welcome to the program. You have a very powerful Twitter post saying, "Is Cleveland Clinic the wokest hospital in America?" Will, your thoughts?
Well, they very well be. They seem to have integrated wokeness across the entire spectrum of activities, from integrating DEI into everything they do. They're currently being sued for discriminating against patients. This isn't just discriminating against hiring and promotion, which is normally what we think about when we think about DEI. This is about discriminating in how they apply medicines and treatment to patients, which is about the worst thing you could possibly think of when you think of horror stories of DEI. They've also integrated net zero pledges across their entire operations. This raises costs for consumers. They've set some of the most aggressive net zero achievements I've ever seen. There's no way to do that with modern technology, especially with hospitals. Almost everything is plastic. What that really means is that they're paying bribes, things called carbon credits, that they then have to pass along those fees to consumers. And then lastly, and perhaps the most disturbing thing, is that they have been leading the way in providing so-called transgender care, gender affirmative care to children. What that really means is genital mutilation on kids under the age of 18. And they've really been charging on that. And even after the passage of the SAFE Act in Ohio, where that's supposed to be banned, they've continued to consult with children around their gender issues or their gender dysphoria. So it seems that they are still continuing to quietly push this far left transgender propaganda that harms children.
Look, the hospital cartels generally are one of the greatest undiagnosed problems in the country. So help me understand this. So the Cleveland Clinic, why are they so interested in the trans propaganda, performing child sex changes, prioritizing race-based care? What is it? Is it an ideological issue? Please help me understand.
That's a great question, and I wish I knew the answer to that. I have my suspicions after what we've seen out of the Department of Government Efficiency that a lot of this might just be straight up being paid for by the federal government, incentivized by funding from the HHS. Radicals within a lot of these government agencies have been pushing this stuff, but that doesn't let Cleveland Clinic off the hook. Their director of DEI has said that they integrate DEI into literally every single thing that they do. So that's not just, again, hiring, promotion. That's in how they treat patients based on their skin color. And that includes, pushing transgender propaganda on children. So it's sort of a chicken or the egg problem. It probably came partially because it's being incentivized by the federal government. But then Cleveland Clinic has become taken over by true believers of this radical far left destructive ideology.
How much money do they make off of the transing of kids?
Well, it's hard to calculate without seeing their books, but it's got to be in the millions of dollars. The number of children these operations are not cheap. These hormones are not cheap. That's what a lot of people don't realize, is that this stuff, once you start it, you can basically never come off of it. So Big Pharma has a customer for life when they trans a child under the age of 18. These children can basically never come off it. We've heard of kids, obviously, who de-change and it's a very painful process, and there's everlasting harms that you can't undo. But from the hospital's perspective and from Big Pharma's perspective, it's a very lucrative venture.
What can we possibly do from a federal government or a regulatory standpoint to go after these childhood butcher clinics such as the Cleveland Clinic?
That's a fantastic question. I was so excited to see President Trump's executive order demanding that every agency look for at least 9 corporations or nonprofits to look into who are violating people's civil rights around DEI. I can think of no better candidate for HHS to open an investigation than the Cleveland Clinic. That said, I would also ask that the state government, Governor DeWine, and the legislature really look closely at the Cleveland Clinic and everything it's doing to continue to push this radical transgender ideology on children and harm them, and also to violate people's civil rights, not just through, again, hiring and promotion, but also literally changing where you rank someone in treatment for illness, strokes specifically, based on their skin color.
So Will, in your experience, what do these hospitals actually fear? Because they're acting with such brazen just attitude, as if they don't care what the law says, and just such blatant disregard for general morality.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that question, because our movement tends to have this mentality that we go to court and we get a judicial ruling, and that precedent that sides with us is the win. In this case, it's very clear. The pain must be the precedent. We need to sue these organizations. They need to lose federal funding until they comply, and they need to be sued when they discriminate against people, not just patients, but also their employees. There has to be a price to this kind of wanton disregard for the law, both at the state and the federal level. So that's, at the end of the day, the only thing that's going to make them change is cutting off funding, losing government grants, and then being sued for the way they've violated the civil rights of both their patients and their employees.
Will, how people learn more, and please share your website.
Certainly. Well, they can follow us at Consumers First on X, or me with at Will Hild, or they can visit us at consumersresearch.org. I would also just say, to the extent you have listeners who are current or former employees at Cleveland Clinic, please go to our website. There's a place where you can share your story. I'm sure, are only looking at the tip of the iceberg. We would love to hear from people who've maybe seen inside what's going on there and could fill in even more some of these questions we have.
Thank you so much, Will. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.